Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about a teacher-student story. Now, the reason why this is coming up, two things. So first of all, one of you guys emailed me about this, and this is one of your guys' high schools, so this is kind of crazy in that way. So thank you to that person for sending me this because I hadn't heard. Second of all, the reason why I wanted to talk about this situation is that in a lot of these inappropriate situations like teacher-student relationships, other things along those lines, I think we often get a little too hung up on just the legality of things. And you'll see in this story why it's relevant, but I just want you to think about it as we go into it, because the reality is, just because something is legal, it doesn't mean it's automatically okay. It doesn't mean that there isn't, let's say, a moral or ethical question that you should attach to it, right? Because there are plenty of things that I know that are legal that I'm not really okay with. Boiling it down to just legality, I think flattens situations that are actually a lot more complicated than just she was 18, she wasn't 18, the age of consent is this, and so it's all good, right? Ethically, we can still have a conversation about just because you can, should you? It can ruin my career. Teacher told teen to keep sexual relationship a secret, court hears. Jason Selby, 38, on trial for sexual assault and sexual exploitation of former student. A teacher at Western Canada High School initiated a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old he'd taught months earlier, a Calgary judge was told Wednesday. Jason Selby, 38, is on trial for sexual assault and sexual exploitation. According to the testimony of his alleged victim, on several occasions, Selby told her she had to keep their relationship a secret. He said, "You cannot tell anyone about us. This is very serious. It can ruin my career." The trial got underway with prosecutor Pam McCluskey's first witness, the alleged victim, who is now 23 years old. A publication ban protects the complainant's identity. CBC News is calling the young woman Amy. Selby taught Amy beginning when she was in grade 10 and all through high school until the winter semester of her grade 12 year. Amy was 17 years old and had graduated a couple of weeks before when she says she began having sex with her 33-year-old former teacher in July of 2018. The initial contact and text messaging began when she was still a student. The age of consent in Canada is 16 years old unless one of the parties is in a position of trust or authority over the other. A previous court ruling connected to the case shows Selby's lawyers planned to demonstrate that the relationship between the parties was not exploitative and that there existed no power imbalance in favor of the accused. This is why I'm talking about ethics and morality and legality, because the age of consent is 16. Okay, so she was above the age of consent, so technically it's legal in that way. However, I would want to question, morally, does this sound like a good idea to you? Because I think that people are forgetting that aspect of things, and I laugh so I don't start screaming. But genuinely, in what world would a teacher think that this is appropriate? Especially because the texting started when she was still a student, which already is weird, and I don't know what it is today about teachers and texting and their students. That would never happened. That has never happened in my life, to text a teacher. Not once. Send a fucking email to their school email and that's it. That's it. Stop there. So that's already crossing a line in my opinion. But aside from that, any teacher who starts hitting on a student only months after they graduated and starts being creepy, to me that is, first of all, immoral, because this is someone you taught. This is still someone that you had power over. You might not have power over them now, but it's difficult for me to believe that when a person sees you months after they graduated, they don't still kind of see you as their teacher, which makes it very weird. I know I met with a teacher during my gap year who had been my high school teacher, and when I met him, he hadn't been my teacher for a year. We were talking about colleges, but he was still my teacher. He was still Mr. XYZ. It wasn't ever balanced because I still saw him as that position of authority. So I also questioned that, like, yeah, technically he's not her teacher anymore. Are you gonna tell me that she suddenly just sees him as a random man, like she'd see him as a random man on the street? No, which is also why I think it's weird, because you've acquired this person's trust. You've acquired a student's trust because you've been teaching her since she was in 10th grade. When did these thoughts start? That's my other question, because when we see shit like this, it's very reminiscent of Bonnie Blue waiting for guys to turn 18 so she can take their virginity. It's like, so you were teaching her since 10th grade. The moment she's done with school, only a couple months later, well, actually you started texting her before, but the moment she's done with school, that's when you find your moment to strike, I guess. Defense lawyer Alan Hepner will get a chance to cross-examine Amy next week. The Calgary Board of Education would only say Selby's unassigned from teaching duties and not actively at work at this time. We cannot comment further as the matter is currently before the courts, said the CBE in a written statement. Amy says she and Selby continued a sexual relationship on and off over the next 2 years until she began to feel uncomfortable about their dynamic. Exactly. If someone has a certain role in your life for an extended period, even if that's just 2 years, 2 years of someone being your teacher, you can't just unplug them from being your teacher and turn them into a random guy. That's part of what I'm talking about, also being problematic. But anyway, in March 2021, Amy says she came across information suggesting she wasn't the only former student Selby had pursued. That's when her perspective shifted. My concern was that when he told me he had no interest in students and I was the only person he'd ever pursued anything of sexual nature with, yes, I believed it in the moment. Amy said Selby began paying attention to her in 2018 toward the end of grade 12. So at least we have an answer to that question. I mean, maybe he'd been interested before, but at least he stayed away until she almost graduated. How kind and thoughtful. That June, Amy was writing final exams ahead of graduation and testified Selby asked her to come visit him in his classroom, which he also called his office. He goes, "You should come visit me. Visit me in my office after you're done," Amy said in her testimony. Later, she says she tracked him down and the two chatted in his empty classroom. In the course of their conversation, Amy says Selby told her he'd learned his nickname was Mr. Dreamy from another former student. Amy testified she felt there was something flirtatious going on between her and the teacher. She said the interaction made her feel special. This is exactly why you cannot separate identities like that. Like, even if when he eventually stops being her teacher, you're still gonna think of him as your teacher. Like, he thought I was cool enough to talk to me like that to hang out after school, she testified. So again, this also shows the gap here, like the age gap, because I'm not saying she's immature. It's normal for a 17-year-old to think that way. But again, if you feel special and like you're a chosen one because this one person who was your teacher and at this point I think still was her teacher is being flirty with you, automatically something's off, in my opinion, because that's a very juvenile way of thinking. Obviously you can be excited when your crush is flirting with you, whatever, but to feel special and like a chosen one, to me it just marks the age gap very clearly of like, ah yes, this is someone who is still very much not fully brain developed. But anyway, the two exchanged numbers and Amy says Selby told her, "You better text me." Age was never brought up, said Amy. At the time I just wanted to be older. I wanted to be 18 already, she said. Another marker of, again, not immaturity, but just being young, you know? The want to be 18, the want to be able to do all these things. The fact that, I think the thing that we also need to remember is that when you're 17, there's so many things that you can't even do that I forget, right? Because I've been an adult for a long time now. But when I think of like the things you can't do at 17 that you have to wait to be 18 to do, that also would creep me out as a 33-year-old being like, ah yes, you in fact cannot vote. The two began texting and after exams were over, they made plans for Amy to go over to Selby's house. It was the first week of July when Amy made her first trip to Selby's home. At the time, he had a young daughter, so Amy said she had to wait until about 9 p.m. to go over. Another red flag. Now, obviously, parents don't need to make their children meet everyone. I do think you should wait until a relationship is solid, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to be said about that. But also the fact that you have to come up with all these logistical things because you can't be seen. It has to be a secret. The moment you have to hide something, probably something's up. Almost immediately, Amy says Selby began lecturing her, saying things like, "You cannot tell anyone about this. People could get the wrong idea. I could get in a lot of trouble." I'm like, "Of course not. I'm not going to do that. I know." Amy says she responded. At that point, I just felt really special that he was risking it in this way. I was like, wow, he must actually think I'm pretty cool. Again, this denotes her age. After that conversation, Amy said Selby offered her a beer, which she declined. She says the two chatted about marijuana, magic mushrooms, and he offered gossip about teachers at Western. Then Amy says Selby asked if he wanted to smoke a joint. She agreed. See, now all of this is, in my opinion, deeply inappropriate from the beginning to the end. First of all, offering her alcohol. She's underage, my guy. Like, what the fuck are you trying to do? Well, we know what you're trying to do. Offering her weed. It's the rapport that makes everything inappropriate. Yes, you're not supposed to drink when you're underage, but it's very different drinking when you're underage, when you're with people that are your age and your classmates versus someone who a couple months ago was telling you what your homework was. But I digress. After rolling a joint in his garage, Amy says the pair got into his hot tub where they then smoked the joint and the situation got quote unquote more intimate. It felt like he was about to kiss me, she testified. As she got out of the hot tub wearing a bra and underwear, he says how hot I am, how sexy, Amy testified. She said Selby followed her into his house where she planned to change. She said he put his hands on her waist and began kissing her. The two moved into the living room and had sex on his sofa. Court heard. From that point, Amy testified that every 3 or 4 days she would drive to Selby's house. There they would either have sex or go for a drive first and have sex after, she told Justice Sean Dunnigan on Wednesday. Amy also said every time she saw Selby, the two would smoke marijuana together. At one point, Amy says Selby told her if we weren't in this situation, we'd be dating. She says he also told her, I don't feel any differently than I did when I was 18. He said, once you turn 18, you just don't feel older. Amy says she believed Selby was making me feel the age difference wasn't a big deal. I was thinking about this in terms of like, how did I feel when I was 18? How do I feel now? I think some things don't change. I think there's some things that when you're close to adulthood don't shift drastically the moment you turn 18, obviously. But at the same time, can I say I feel the exact same way now that I'm 31 as when I was 18? Fuck no. There's so many things that have changed. And even just like ideally your self-confidence as a person, your self-confidence in your direction in life, all of these things, hopefully they get stronger, right? As you keep going and go down whatever path you deem right for yourself. So to say that you feel the same, that basically nothing has changed since you were 18 to 31 or 33, however old this guy is, that's not true, in my opinion. But in this case, it's convenient to say, right? It's convenient to say, oh, actually, it's not a big deal that we have this massive age gap and that I was your teacher a couple months ago and that I gave you my number while I was still your teacher and that we met up and I was being creepy while I was still your teacher. None of that's a big deal because actually, even though I'm 33, literally nothing has changed since I was 18. On one of their hangouts, Amy says she and Selby bought root beer floats in an A&W drive-thru. As they approached the pickup window, the employee recognized the teacher, exclaiming, "Mr. Selby." Immediately he moved, bent forward, blocking the girl's view of me, said Amy. The two kept having sex after Amy turned 18. When she was home from university, the pair continued to meet up. In January 2019, Amy says Selby contacted her about rumors that he'd heard at Western. He messaged me saying, "Please don't tell anyone about us," Amy said in her testimony. Amy says she was kind of panicked. She says Selby told her, "You'd better deny it." She says she agreed she would. See, even this man's entire behavior about this, any excuse anyone makes up is completely obliterated by the fact that this guy is continuously saying, hey, don't tell anyone. Hey, don't tell anyone. This is gonna ruin my career. And it's like, okay, can we ask why it's gonna ruin your career? If you're aware it's gonna ruin your career, clearly you're aware something is amiss here and you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. So maybe you're aware that morally, ethically, and obviously professionally, this shit does not fly. This is not gonna work. And on the contrary, the moment people find out about this, you are right. Your career is going to nosedive, which, to be honest, you deserve. But also, the fact that he'd say, "You'd better deny it," that sounds threatening to me. That alone, in my opinion, you can't argue against. You can't make excuses for him because he fully knows that this shit is fucked up. That's why she has to hide it. Soon after, Amy says she began to feel Selby only wanted sex. She says she also began feeling uncomfortable about her relationship with Selby. The texting slowed down and the sex became less frequent. In 2020, Amy says she told a new boyfriend that she'd slept with her high school teacher and he was very weirded out by it. Yeah, duh. It made me feel weird too and super uncomfortable and kind of ashamed, said Amy. I didn't realize it was messed up. That was the first time. We go back to the thing of not being an adult and maturity levels. If you don't realize that it was messed up until you tell someone else, that is pretty telling about the situation in its entirety. You weren't fully aware of what exactly you were getting yourself into, which I do think here is a product of her age and the age gap. There's a lot of conversation going on about age gaps and how they're not a big deal right now on Twitter. This is exactly why certain age gaps, to be clear, are a big deal, because there's clearly a disconnect here. You didn't think it was weird to have sex with someone who was your teacher only a couple months ago, if even a couple of months ago. That to me says everything. In 2021, Amy came to believe there was at least one other teen Selby had a sexual relationship with. By then, she said she'd also come to realize how young she was when the relationship began. That's when she says she decided to go to the police. A lot of people, when you're at that age, feel like you're grown up, said Amy. I felt like an adult at the time. So there is another article that follows this up, which makes the situation even more strange. She said she was trying to get the teacher to sleep with her. A classmate testifies at sex assault trial. Former classmate of alleged sex assault victim says the woman expressed desire to have sex with teacher Jason Selby. So basically, this person is claiming that Amy was trying to quote unquote get the teacher. The woman accusing former Calgary teacher Jason Selby of sexual abuse proclaimed an intention to sleep with him, a former classmate testified on Tuesday. The witness, who came forward after reading an online report of Selby's Calgary Court of Justice trial, said she felt compelled to contact his lawyer with what she considered quote unquote missing information. She told the defense counsel, Alan Hepner, she had a brief conversation with Amy following an end-of-year school exam. I'm just gonna say Amy to make things easier, or else it gets messy. She said she was trying to get the teacher to sleep with her, the witness said. She said Amy then walked up to Selby and spoke with him. She didn't say Mr. Selby was her sexual target, but it was clear who she was speaking to. Amy, who can't be identified, testified Monday she has no recollection of the conversation and was not close friends with her ex-classmate. Selby is accused of sexually exploiting Amy, now 23, when she was still 17. We know this. Under cross-examination, Crown Prosecutor Pam McCluskey questioned how the witness came to contact the defense lawyer. She said she was at school in Europe, and during a group chat with some of her former classmates, someone sent her a copy of an article covering Selby's trial. In the group conversation, they had discussed their belief it was the alleged victim who had filed a complaint against Selby. It was more gossip than anything, she said. She told McCluskey that none of them actually knew the complainant had engaged in a lengthy sexual relationship with Selby for nearly 2 years. You felt it was unfair to Mr. Selby, McCluskey asked about her former teacher's prosecution. I felt like it was missing information. Meanwhile, Hepner called a former colleague of Selby's to describe an incident the witness believed involved the complainant early in the 2017-2018 years. Retired teacher Rick Patterson said early one morning in September, midweek, a female student entered a classroom where he and Selby were playing guitar, plopped into a desk, and indicated she was exhausted from partying. She said words to the effect of, "Since I've turned 18, I've been partying a little," Patterson said. The phrase "turned 18" stuck. He said he later learned it was Amy. But under cross-examination, he told McCluskey it took a conversation with Selby more than 4 years after the fact to jog his memory. He, Selby, said something along the lines of, "Do you remember conversation?" And I said, "Yes, I do," Patterson said. Selby started having sex with a student about a week after the end of school and before her 18th birthday. Justice Sean Dunnigan will begin to hear final submissions on Wednesday. Based on all of this, it's like multiple people picked up on this being out of line. So there's this other teacher, there's the boyfriend that came after Selby who was weirded out by the fact that his girlfriend had slept with the high school teachers. There are a lot of people here who are realizing that none of this was ever okay, which again, underlines Amy's age, because it seems like a lot of people were realizing how weird that was and she hadn't at the time. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Obviously there is grayness here, I guess, because he wasn't technically your teacher anymore, and there are all these things that technically make it so that legally it was fine and we return to the legal versus ethical / moral. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.